Before I started on the gel coat, I talked to my good friend John Schwartzel at Schwartzel Marine in Hockingport, Ohio. I wanted to get some advice on the best way to go about it.
As far as the gel coat goes on this boat, you can see the snaps on it. It's been covered, and up here on the flat surfaces, it's not bad at all. But a little bit down here where it wasn't protected, it's a little dead. But it's not bad at all. The sandpaper, some wet sandpaper, 1,000, 1,200, and rub that out, and then take your rubbing compound with a foam pad on your buffer, and it'll come right back. It's not bad at all. I mean, just a little, you can just feel a little roughness on it. Not bad at all. It's pretty good shape for an older boat.
All right, I've got all that old nasty carpet out of here. I want to move on to the gel coat. In order to buff the top deck, I want to remove all the fixtures so there's nothing to interfere with it. So let's get going. Well, as you can see, I got the boat stripped down. I've taken out the carpeting. I've removed the depth finders, the hardware, the trolling motor, everything there is to remove, the seats. Now it's time to get buffing and to put the new carpeting in. And I guess the big question at this point is, will I ever get this thing back together again? You know, because the surface is so smooth on the upper deck, I didn't think it would benefit from wet sanding. But boy, I was wrong. I did a little experimenting, and you can really do quite a bit of good with it. So I'm going to do a little demonstration, show you how this happens here. Okay, what I'm going to do is wet sand this, and then I'm going to buff it by hand for you. Now you might be able to see it looks a little better already. See how this is and how dusty it is over here? It just looks dusty now. It's starting to shine just from the wet sanding. Now I'm going to take just a touch of rubbing compound and really bring it out. You know, actually, you really don't need an electric buffer. You could do this all by hand. The only problem is it's just going to take you a long time to get it done. Okay, let's remove that tape and see what we've got here. Now, I hope you can see it with this light. This is very shiny. It doesn't have that dull, dusty look to it. It just took a minute to bring it back. We can bring back the whole deck like that. This still shot gives you a better idea of how that buffing worked. The center part is what I buffed on the deck, and you can see it's silvery and shiny. On each side of that is what it looked like before I used the wet sanding and the buffing. Quite a difference. Now the sides of the hull were pretty dull, so I started out with 600 grit, wet and dry sandpaper, and then went to 1,000 grit. So a lot of work here. Sanding with wet and dry not only brought back the shine, it eliminated a lot of minor scratches all over the boat. For the deeper scratches, I actually went to 220 dry sandpaper and got rid of more of them that way. Thing is, you have to be very careful with 220 because you can go right through that clear gel coat and get into the flake and the color, and that's the last thing you want to do. After wet sanding, the next step is buffing the hull. If you use an electric buffer, make sure it doesn't run any faster than 2,500 RPM or it will generate too much heat for the gel coat. 1,500 to 2,500 RPM is about right. Unfortunately for me, my buffer crapped out on me before I really got started on the buffing end of things. So being the cheapskate I am, I actually buffed out most of the hull by hand. Okay, now I'm going to get after the running pad. This is very important because any irregularities, even very slight ones, will interfere with the water flowing to the prop and could affect your performance. So I have a few slight patches under here and a few rough spots. There's really nothing structurally wrong, but I want to smooth everything out so that I'll get my optimum performance. So I've got a very little repair that was done here. It looks like something innocuous, but it can be enough to spray water away from your prop. So what I'm going to do is, I'm not going to mess around here. I'm going to take 220 sandpaper and just work on this edge and make sure it's nice and flat and sharp. It And I notice it's kind of rough up and down here, so I'm going to just sand the whole area with a flat piece of 220 sandpaper. Now after I do this, I can progressively take it down smoother, just as I did with the rest of the boat with wet and dry sandpaper, and get it nice and smooth. Okay, I'm up under the pad now, and here's where they did that repair, which prevented delamination, but it's a rough edge, and I don't want a rough edge leading into my prop, so I need to sand this down. Now these scuff marks are no big deal. I can sand these out, and that's really not an issue. But this is something I need to work on. So I'm going to take some sandpaper and sand it down smooth, and if I'm lucky, there's enough filler in there that I won't have to add any more to fill in any gaps. So let's see what happens. I'm using a 6G grit here. I'm really going after this to get it done. Here's my running pad after I've progressively taken it down with finer grits of sandpaper and wet and dry sandpaper. I also buffed it with rubbing compound. It's got nice sharp edges. It's going to do a great job for me. Well, I have sanded and buffed and sanded and buffed, sanded and buffed till I'm blue in the face. I probably got 20 hours in this, but finally the old 24-year-old bass boat is starting to have some shine to it. So thing is, we're not finished yet. We worked so hard to get this shine. Now we want to protect it. Now a lot of folks use a wax, but I've got a product that I found years ago that I like much better. It's called Finish First, and that it actually lays down a tough polymer finish that bonds with the fiberglass, with the gel coat, and it will last 5-6 months. So you're not going to be out there every couple of weeks waxing your boat as you will with a traditional wax. Now they have a prep for it. I didn't know if I would need it since I buffed this thing out, but I talked to the folks at Finish First, and they recommended that I use the prep. It's actually an even finer buffing compound than the one I used, and it'll just make an even smoother finish. You can apply Finish First with a rag and buff it out that way, or you could use a buffer, which is what I'm going to do. So you first apply some Finish First to the buffer, then you let it go to work. Now Finish First prep only works while it's still wet, so as soon as it dries, it's pretty much done its work. And then you just use a rag to wipe it off and move on to the next spot. All right, we've done all the preparation buffing with Finish First. Now we're going to do the easy part, and that's actually applying Finish First. Just take a clean cloth, apply a few drops of this stuff, and just spread it very thin and evenly. That's all you have to do. In a few minutes, it's going to turn into a haze, and you can wipe it off as soon as it dries, but the best results recommended by the manufacturer to let it dry and adhere for like 24 hours to cure. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to coat the entire boat, and then I'm going to just let it set up really good and get a nice tough finish on there. All right, I've waited nearly 24 hours after applying Finish First, and if you remember, it went on real clear. Now it's real hazy. And watch how easy this comes off with a clean cloth. There it is. That's all you have to do. I'm going to apply 2 or 3 finishes with Finish First, and that one bottle will be enough to do it all. Well, as you can see, all that rubbing and scrubbing, all the hard work I did really paid off. I've got a nice shine back in this old boat. Looks good. I'm really proud of the job I did.